Good afternoon, and welcome to Ask Her. I'm Jackie Lendsey, Interim President and CEO of the Washington Area Women's Foundation. We're a community-supported foundation that invests in the power of women and girls of color in the Washington, D.C. region. We award grants and advocate alongside our partners toward gender and racial justice. Ask Her is the foundation's interview series with women leaders, partners, community members, and supporters who work tirelessly for women, girls, and gender-expansive people of color. If you hear anything good, be sure to tweet during our chat using hashtag #AskHerSeries, and you can follow us at the Women's FNDTN. I'll say that again. You can follow us at the Women's FNDTN and be sure to tweet during this session at hashtag #AskHerSeries. And if you'll see all of that in the chat. We'd like to welcome everyone joining us today, including Tricia Vasquez and Dr. Gloshonda Lawyer, our American Sign Language interpreters for our webinar. Thank you so much for being with us today. We're thrilled to have an especially timely conversation about the intersection of wellness and nonprofit leadership, especially for leaders who are trying to navigate their nonprofits through this ongoing pandemic. Before we introduce our guest, we'd love to hear a word from our sponsor today, the Leaderbridge, an initiative of the Crimsonbridge Foundation. Welcome, Danielle Reyes, President and CEO of the Crimsonbridge Foundation, here on behalf of the Leaderbridge team. Danielle.
Thank you, Jackie. We're truly grateful to the entire Washington Area Women's Foundation team for putting together today's session and to have you as partners of our Women and Girls Leadership and Civic Engagement Program. Hello, everyone. On behalf of Leaderbridge and the Crimsonbridge Foundation, I'm so pleased to be here along with my colleagues, Caitlin Mayo and Robin Atterbury Ellis. I want to extend a special welcome to the many Leaderbridge alumni who informed the need for this session and are participating today. Leaderbridge is a comprehensive nonprofit leadership initiative of the Crimsonbridge Foundation that works together in partnership with nonprofit leaders and a variety of leadership and professional development programs. Our goals, quite simply, are to meet the professional needs and interests of nonprofit leaders of color and of identities that are underrepresented in the leadership of our region, and to foster a more representative, connected, and collaborative leadership network. Today is an example, as Equity Through Action is one of our program partners with a current offering on our calendar, and Deanna is a Leaderbridge alumna of Georgetown's CP&L program, the Positive Intelligence program with Bob Wittig, and I think the Catalog for Philanthropy's ED cohort. To learn more and sign up for a program, please visit the leaderbridgedc.org website now in the chat. Thanks. Jackie?
Thank you, Danielle. And to your team, your sponsorship today is beyond appreciation. Thank you so much for partnering with us and suggesting our amazing speakers today. Please help me welcome C. Marie Taylor, President and Principal Consultant of Equity Through Action, and Diana Ortiz, President and CEO of Doorways. I'm going to mention just a snippet of their bios, but do know they both come to the conversation with a large breadth of knowledge. C. Marie Taylor is a leadership, diversity, and race equity consultant with more than 25 years of expertise in guiding organizations to establish safe, equitable, inclusive, and people-centered work environments. In Ms. Taylor's immediate past role as the president and CEO officer of Leadership Montgomery, she served as the organization's main thought leader, creating racial equity training and technical assistance programming. Before her time at Leadership Montgomery, Ms. Taylor served as the Executive Director of the Greater Washington Community Foundation of Montgomery County, where she was instrumental I'm sorry, I can't talk today, where she was instrumental in initiating countywide research that led to the creation of the Children's Opportunity Trust. Diana Ortiz is the president and CEO at Doorways, a local nonprofit seeking to end domestic and sexual violence and families experiencing homelessness. Diana is a passionate and creative leader with 20 years of experience advocating for the well-being and safety of children and families, specifically those impacted by complex trauma and violence. Diana is committed to working with historically marginalized communities and leading a new generation of advocates who understand the importance of collective efforts when making systems change and meaningful solutions in our community. I want to welcome both C. Marie and Diana. We're going to spend about 40 minutes in conversation with C. Marie and Diana, asking them some questions that I know you all want to ask. And there will be time for your questions at the end of this conversation. So let's begin. Can you both tell us about your organizations and the work that you do? Let's start with C. Marie.
Well, thank you so much. I am so excited to be here. So I'll tell you a little bit about the work that we do. Our main focus is to create safe, inclusive spaces for people of color in the workplace, whether it's for-profit, nonprofit, wherever they're working, is to recreate the workplace through an equity lens. And really to shape how people are showing up, right? Learn new behaviors, new programs, policies, and practices. We call it changing the 3 Ps through an equity lens. And so that's what we do. And I love it, love it, love it. Love it, love it, love it. And I'll talk about more of it, why I love it later.
Diana.
Thank you, Jackie, and such an honor to be here with C. Marie as well. I am proud and humbled to be leading Doorways. Doorways, we're a community-based nonprofit in Arlington, and we provide shelter, wraparound, supportive services, crisis intervention, and all the way to housing to survivors of intimate partner violence. More commonly, like we say it as domestic violence. Also sexual assault and families and youth that are experiencing homelessness. So we at Doorways envision a community that is free of violence because we know it's possible and where everyone has a safe and stable home. That's what we live, and we wake up passionate and do this.
Thank you. We conducted a listening session at the top of the year with Crimsonbridge Foundation's Leaderbridge, a leadership network which engages and connects nonprofit leaders in the Greater Washington region to leadership development programs that address their needs and interests. Several women leaders of color included feeling overworked, wanting more mental health support, help with planning in a rapidly changing climate, and they also expressed wanting more forums to connect. In both of your experiences, C. Marie and Diana, are there any trends you've seen among obstacles nonprofit leaders of color are facing, particularly during the pandemic?
Yeah, so it's so interesting. I actually left my position at Leadership Montgomery during the middle of the pandemic, which was a bold leap, and a few years earlier than I had planned to open this company. But in that regard, knew that this is where I needed to be, right? And so I had a client recently who said that she was Fannie Lou Hamer tired, right? That this pandemic is wearing her out. And that has stuck with me, right? And so we try to spend all the time that we can with any of our clients to help them figure out if they're feeling Fannie Lou Hamer tired, how can we help them, right? What does that look like? How can they maybe take a sabbatical? How can they say no, right? Which is the first thing that we can do, is say no more. How can they find new pathways in their company to show up? And how can we just rethink the white dominant culture that we've been living in, right? That's creating this tiredness, right? along with all the things that are happening with the pandemic. It's just exacerbating it. So the trends that I'm seeing is that people are trying to figure out just what is going to be their priority for their livelihood. And starting with their livelihood is how they live outside of work, right? Which was part of the reason I made my exodus, right? And if you look at some of the folks who've run nonprofits in this area, there has been a mass exodus of women of color because they're tired, right? And they're not getting supported. So the trends that I see is that people are making big sweeping changes in the name of preserving themselves, which I am happy for and want more of, right? And so however we can help support that through our work, that's what we're here for.
I just love the quote, Fannie Lou Hamer tired.
I mean, it says something to your soul, right?
It speaks right to your soul. And as a woman of color, I can see it, I can feel it from throughout my career as a nonprofit leader. Mm-hmm. And so I think it's just a great way to describe it. I also loved your trend in terms of making big sweeping change and how that change is impacting others. Diana, specifically, you worked with Doorways for nearly 10 years before leaving for an opportunity overseas. But you returned to Doorways in 2021 during the pandemic, and you were appointed president and CEO during the pandemic. Can you talk to us about that transition to leadership for you as a woman of color who's been in the industry then and now?
Absolutely. And again, I think that in a way, coming to this leadership in the middle of a pandemic was a nice relay of energy sources. There should be a different word for like the fatigue that leaders are feeling and experiencing after this 2+ years and counting, right? While the world or some of the world feels that the crisis has passed, we're still in crisis. We are dealing specifically in our organization. The pandemic has just brought more need, more than, like what we can wrap our arms around it. I think specifically it's great to be back to like what we call home and to an organization that I dearly, dearly care and know, and I'm so proud of. And also I've experienced what I would say, like two concepts: surplus visibility. So as a woman of color leading an organization, it's been under a microscope during a pandemic. How are you going to make this work? And as a woman of color during the times that we're living in, how are you going to make it better? So I think specifically women of color in leadership positions, we deal with all what we bring us, like our intersectionality and the surplus visibility. There is an additional doubt, question, interest, wanting, to us having the magic wand and make it better. And I think that is an added pressure that we face leading an organization, leading a nonprofit during these times.
I think it's interesting you Diana, talk about that surplus visibility and being under a microscope. And there's nothing like being under a microscope as a nonprofit leader, but being a nonprofit leader, a woman of color, the microscope just seems to turn into one of those microscopes that looks out at Halley's Comet. You just think they can see you from every planet. And I also liked your reference to magic wand, as if there's some magic wand that we as women of color have that's going to make everything better. So it sort of comes back to what you just talked about. And then C. Marie, what you were talking about in terms of the Fannie Lou Hamer being tired and the trends, but also your work in terms of working with nonprofit leaders, women of color, as they go through this. Your mission is to aid in creating a safe, just, and inclusive anti-racist organization. How does that play a part when it comes to coaching nonprofit leaders or helping them reach their goals, helping them deal with what Diana's talking about? But what is the impact on your work to date, given the pandemic? And then What innovative ways have you suggested or can you suggest for nonprofit leaders who feel challenged right now?
Oh boy. So there's
And I know that's a lot all at once.
That's okay. I'm going to try to take it a piece at a time. So a few things. So the way that we set up the work at our company is through an ARM paradigm, right? And so the ARM stands for acknowledge, reframe, and model. And then you literally rinse and repeat, right? So let's acknowledge the things we don't know, the things that we pretend we don't know, right? And that's where we do our foundational work, our foundational classes, like the roots of race and racism. Then once we are all the same level, right? Let's reframe our thinking. Now we know what race actually means, where it came from, how it was created. We know what bias means, how it's created, how it shows up at work, right? Now, how are we going to reframe our work, right? How are we going to change that employee manual? How are we going to put our pronouns on Zoom, right? How are we going to figure out what the bathrooms could and should look like, right? Now that we have acknowledged what we didn't know, what we didn't want to know, right? And then in the model, we're actually going to do it. So the way that we try to help, particularly women of color, is through that acknowledge piece, right? Helping their counterparts acknowledge past harms, current harms, things that they're doing, and then getting them to invest in reframing how to do their work and then modeling new behavior. And there's a couple different ways that we do that, right? So I try to use myself as a practice example for other leaders in the organization, right? So I ran nonprofits for 25 years. So I know all of the things that Diana's talking about, right? And experience it even as a person who owns their own company now, right? But I use myself to help display humanity, vulnerability, right? I carry the water, right? So if there's a message Diana needs to get to her board member, I will carry it for her because my goal is for Diana to win. And so if I can do that, then that's what I'm here for, right? So we try to carry the water for those leaders so the messages can get through because there's some kind of magic when the consultant says it, even though Diana said the exact same thing, right? But the point is the behavior changes. So I'll carry it for Diana, right? I'll carry it for you, Jackie. It's fine, right? The other thing that we try to do is to try to get people to think differently about how they show up, which means at the simple base, use your 2 ears and your 1 mouth in proportion. When we talk about race equity, inclusion, all of this work, right? You've got to use your ears and your mouth in proportion, right? Or you have to pay attention in proportion, right? So if you can't hear, you're still listening, right? Through the sign, right? In proportion and responding in proportion. And then the other thing I think we try to help people do and talk about in innovation and how this work can show up is right sizing the work, right? Right sizing expectations. So go back to that microscope. I can't talk now, Jackie. That microscope piece, right? So how do you right size the expectations for Diana, knowing that she's working in a pandemic, right? No, she's going to respond to every email in 2 minutes. That's not going to happen. Let's right size that expectation. Ways that we've tried to be creative and innovative is, of course, showing up virtually when we can, show up in person, giving people space and grace is what we call it, right? And space and effort in our work. And the thing that we really are trying to get people to be innovative around, I mentioned it before and I'll probably mention it 2 more times, is looking at white dominant culture behaviors in organizations and asking why. Why is it that we have to do it this way? Who created that? What value system is that? Can we do it a different way? Because that's actually innovation, right? Is thinking and questioning things differently. And so those are some of the things that hopefully make sense. I tried to answer all the pieces together. But those are some of the things that we do through the coaching, the training, the technical assistance in our organization. Oh, Jackie, you're on mute.
Sorry, I had to cough. They sound like great practices and sound like just great information and examples for our group to latch onto. You know, this notion of ARM, where you're looking at acknowledging, reframing, and then modeling, just do it. This notion of looking at white dominant behavior in organizations, and why do we still do it that way? Why did we start doing it that way in the first place? And can we do it in other ways? And I see Diana shaking her head with that. And so I guess my next question is, or that leads us into my next question for both of you, which is, when it comes to planning and managing a team, what are some new strategies leaders can use that are sensitive to what everyone might be dealing with right now? And you sort of hit on any number of them, but what are some of those concrete strategies like ARM that folks can latch on to and use as leaders right now? Diana, you might want to start.
Sure. I mean, it resonates so much with what C. Marie is saying about just, like humanity and in acknowledging, to begin with, that we're humans and putting ourselves as examples. I love that. And I think that in a way, I'm the first one that would admit I get it wrong so many times, and I'll be the first one to apologize. And I don't know if they're innovative, but I really believe in understanding trauma and collective trauma, and understanding that while COVID impacted all of us, it did not impact us all the same. So we have some reference point, but by no means I can compare my experience to someone else, a team member that may have not, may have lost childcare completely and didn't have the support system that I have as a mom, right? So we talked a lot about being trauma-informed for our clients. And I really, really, truly believe that this is the time where that trauma-informed for our work with our clients needs to be generalized and expanded to our staff, our workforce, our team members, our colleagues, and our peers. Knowing and understanding that what we have gone through, the grief, the loss, what we're dealing with impacts how we think, how we experience the world, how we show up, what we do. So that, I would say that's our basis. And if we understand and we are a trauma-informed community, then when I show up and talk to someone else, it's not a different experience than, my doctor's office or my counselor, but we are all in this understanding how trauma is part of us. I do think that connections are key. And when there is a connection, then tasks can be, conflict about tasks can be solved. When there are mistakes, we can repair and we can heal and we can start again. But we don't have the connection piece first. And we acknowledge that, again, we're human. We're showing up at work with the best that we can. Nobody wakes up and wants to do wrong. No one wants to, make a mess or just, not be their best. So understanding that connection is key for everything we do. And understanding and firmly believe that how I show up with my team and with the colleagues and with the peers, that's going to trickle down. If there is a magic wand, that is the magic. That is the recipe of understanding that how we show up and how we treat the grace, the space, the caring, that will also have that ripple effect. So those would be the things that, firmly believe and stand by.
See, Marie.
Yeah. Yes to all the things that Diana said. The 2 points I think I would add is we try to remain humanity and humility centered, right? Which is a different take at work, right? We all the time I'm like, oh, where's the humanity? Where's the humility, right? We embrace failure, right? I call it our first attempt in learning, right? Oh, I made a mistake. Let me figure that out, right? And the thing that we've been trying at Equity Through Action, which I'm so lucky to do, to Diana's point, right? We're all experiencing this pandemic in different ways, right? By the grace of God, I was able to quit my job and then figure it out, right? I talked to my spouse, I was like, can we do this? It's going to be okay, right? And we're making it happen, right? And so in that fashion, when I formed this company, I formed it, we work as an envelope, right? So an envelope, all four corners are important, right? So, and you got to use that glue to kind of keep each other together. So I'm trying to practice what I preach when I'm talking to other clients, right? It doesn't have to be this top up thing. Yes, there's a president. However, the person who sets up meetings is just as important, because if they don't have this meeting, there's no company, right? So we try to, in terms of your the question you asked, Jackie, in terms of strategies, looking at how you're doing business, is there a different way to do it? So we're doing that, right? And modeling it for our clients, talking about pay transparency, we do it and show it to our clients.
So I have a,
But I'm going to be quiet.
I have a follow-up for both of you, and that is, can you give us an example?
Yeah, I'll give you an example, and then I'll be quiet. Pay transparency. So at our company, when we win a contract, everybody in our team knows what the contract was, what everyone's getting paid, including myself. We have a chart. When you start on ETA, we're like, this is what level 1 gets paid, level 2, level 3, everybody knows, right? When I send out a proposal, the consultants see the proposal that goes out. So we practice that and model it. So that's an example.
Diana?
Yes, I think one of the things that we've been doing is bringing the trauma informed, so bringing a therapist to our teams as something that it's part of our budget now. Sure, we can use more, but it's something that acknowledging that is what, like the times that the work that we do. And if we extend the mental health support to our clients, we need to be doing a role modeling and showing up for our teams as well.
All those are great examples. Now I'm going to ask you a question that I know everyone who is a leader of a nonprofit, but certainly women of color, is probably thinking, and came up in our conversations when we talked with the members of Leaderbridge, is around this question of what are some actionable strategies or language leaders can use to set and maintain boundaries with their boards? Because all the things you talked about, the arm and remaining, talking about humanity and humility and giving people space and grace, and bringing in therapists. If you're going to use them with clients, then you're going to use them with your team, or pay equity, or making sure that everyone understands what everyone is doing as a part of the team. But bottom line, as a nonprofit leader, you're working with a nonprofit board. So, what are some actionable strategies in this area or language that our leaders can use to set and maintain boundaries with their boards? Because I know that's a question people are thinking about.
It is. Diana, do you want to go first? You want me to go first?
I can start, and maybe,
okay.
We can take.
Yeah.
I have deep respect and appreciation for our board members, that they're choosing to be part of a mission. And I treat them as partners, and that means we're in this together, but we're not doing the same things. So we all have roles and responsibilities, and having that clear communication, close communication, going back to the connection. If I know who I'm talking to, and we have that ongoing communication, if there is a task conflict, it's different than a personality or a person's conflict. I do think that the board's right and responsibilities are to know more than just me as the organization. So our team is, it's part of many of these conversations. And that way, there is also the transparency piece. It's not just like what you're getting from me, but it's a team effort. I do think that those have been very helpful, understanding that, like everyone has things that they're doing aside from like their role has been also very helpful, setting some of that expectations. I've had to cut myself in not over committing, because I want to say yes, and I want to say yes, and I'll have it tomorrow, and then I'll have to say, actually, I can't, I need more time. So those have been like very helpful things, just understanding that there are priorities and urgent things and things that I would love to get to, but maybe I don't have the time. and have those honest conversations, and the transparency in communications have been very key.
So what I'll add is a few things. We do something called the 24-24-24 rule. Can it wait 24 seconds before I respond? Maybe it needs to wait 24 minutes. Maybe it needs to wait 24 hours. And so I will say to a board member, you know what, I'm going to need 24 minutes to reflect upon what you're asking me so I can give you a thoughtful answer. So it's a way of saying, hold on, and I'm going to be thoughtful, right? We work with companies to help set up community agreements, which are basically ground rules. We're going to work this way, right? And then if somebody kind of falls out of that ground rule, we'll go back to it. Like, hey, Jackie, remember we said number 24? Let's get on back to that, right? And being okay with no. We're not okay with the word no in this country. We're not okay with board members hearing no from leaders. And so having that conversation and getting board members comfortable with hearing that the ED is going to say, no, I can't do that right now. I don't have time for that, right? And for them to respect that, right? So having a deep conversation about no, and that it's okay to say no. And with that, the last thing that we talk a lot about within our company and with folks like the Leaderbridge folks that we're hoping to work with, we're super excited about that, is it a preference or a policy? Because if it's a preference that I email you on Saturday, we're not going to do it. If it's a policy, I'll email you on Saturday, right? And helping board members understand preferences versus policies, right? And always going back to the why. Why are we doing this? Is it mission centered, right? So those are the things that we try to help people think about in boundaries, and that we try to practice and model so that when we're working with leaders of color, particularly because it's so hard for us to say and keep those boundaries because we're so worried what people are going to think about us, right? We're just worried, well, what is this board member going to think? And then we're tired, right? And we're not as productive. So I'll stop there because I could keep going. Go ahead, Diana.
I'll just add one. I
Diana.
love it. And I think that part of it is being okay with those boundaries, right? Like, and being okay knowing that the boundaries might make someone uncomfortable, but that means that it's working, right? In some cases. I just love, and I got the feedback from one of our board members last week. I took some time off and I purposefully did not reply to emails. And I got the great feedback of like, I'm so glad you didn't respond to my email. That means that you're following your own commitment. I'm like, absolutely, right. It's not an emergency and not something that I want my team members, my colleagues to be doing either. So walk the walk, walk the talk, and being okay with setting, like knowing what those boundaries are.
I think you've both given, C. Marie, you've given us great examples and great strategies. And Diana, you've given us a great example. We've all been there. It's Saturday and you get that email and you're like, oh, gee. And it's on, used to be the email was only on your computer, but now it's on your phone and your tablet. It's following you around like Alexa, and you're just going to go, really? And so you have to you're using that strategy of having set up with your board. Is it preference or policy? If it's preference, then I'm going to deal with it one way. If it's policy, I'm going to deal with it another way. But those are really concrete ways of looking at and organizing one's work with boards, such that you don't find yourself on that Saturday answering that email when in fact it could wait until Monday. It's not going to be the end of the world at the organization. And I like the fact that you both talked about practice and modeling. So, these are not necessarily the ways in which boards are always worked with. So it takes time for everyone to get used to the strategies that you just shared. So sometimes we're not as comfortable with them right away, but keep practicing, keep working on it, keep modeling it. I think you talked about, and I think both of you have used this word or these words, but we're tired. And I think one of the things that people in the group talked about, in the Leaderbridge group talked about, and I hope you'd spend a little bit of time talking about now, is that when it comes to wellness, some of the buzzwords we hear are self-care, we hear grounding, we hear mindfulness. which could include massages and exercise or just treating ourselves. And we get the sense from our conversations with leaders that that can only get us so far, that can only go so far. How else can nonprofit leaders find solace and stay mentally well during this time? And a lot of what you said already in terms of strategies are certainly ways, but this is about themselves. How do they find peace and stay mentally well during this time?
So I was thinking about this. I was thinking, what do I love? I love laughing, right? So if I need to decompress for 5 minutes, I'll watch some goofy reels, right? I find things that I love so that I can take a break from working. Now, I also love working, so I have to remind myself, okay, there are other things to do besides working. So I also love spinning, and I've been loving spinning way before it was cool. So there's a few things that I love that I do that takes care of me, right? And it doesn't even feel like, because sometimes I think we even get tired by the thought of, I have to figure out self-care. Like, just release all the, I don't know, the Oprah moments, right? And like, what do you just do something that makes you feel good? Because to your point, Jackie, it's about you. What makes you feel good? Maybe it's getting a new lipstick at CVS. I don't know. Do that thing. To me, that's what self-care is, demystifying it, right? And it doesn't have to cost a thing. We can go out for a walk for free. I can watch, goofy reels off the internet. So that's what I would say is, what do you love? When do you feel the best? And do that, even if it's for 2 minutes a day.
Yeah, I love the concept of like what you do like every day, what you do in the short term, what you do like in the long term for like caring for yourself. I have to confess, the self-care as a word, it's been so like commercialized that kind of lost some of like that importance of community care. Like as C. Marie said, like, what do I love or who do I love? Like, to me, some of that self-care is like who I am surrounded by. So understanding that I'm a mom of 3 young kids. My eldest is 10. So I want to go to their violin class, and that's self-care to me. Like, if I can protect that time and go and be with my kids and listen to them trying to like figure that out, that is something that I cherish and I care, and it makes me feel, whole. And having that deep conversation with a friend, or the lighthearted, again, laugh with my sister, and like making those times are very, very important to me. And I want that for like everyone in our team. Like, I want people to like be able to like have that permission to, work is a very important part. I do love work too. So, right. Like, it's like, I love it, but I love other things. And I think that that's part of, caring for each other, having those conversations, knowing that our identities are more than what we're doing, although it's very hard.
Well, one of the things that the leaders said to us and thank you both, one of the things that the leaders said to us as we talked with them, the Leaderbridge leaders, and they wanted to know more about, or at least to get your thoughts on, is leaders need a space for healing. What are some of the ways you've connected with other leaders or teams this year, or your team this year, that have brought peace or provided support? Diana, you talked about a therapist for your team, not just for your clients, but for your team. What are some ways that both of you have brought that healing space, that time for your teams, and how could those of us who are on this in this session today as nonprofit leaders, are those some of the things that we could use for our teams also?
Specifically for us, and like this may bring different perceptions, but supervision is part of our culture, or one-on-ones or check-ins, however we want to call it, but having those one-on-one connections with our team members. And it's more than a task or running a list of like what you did or what you didn't do or like what's next, but it's like connecting at that human level. How are you doing? what, like, how is your, like, sister surgery that you happened to tell me, last time. Understanding that, again, like, we're all bringing like ourselves, and some of our, like my team members, some of them might share more than others, but everyone has something that is going on. And if we embrace that one-on-one, that supervision as a reflection, as a space to really reflect and know you more and know what's happening, then that's something that, again, like, it can be generalized and trickle down across our organization. I love just a good talk with someone, like deep conversation, like being able to pick up the phone and talk to someone, or go for a walk and process, right? Like, there is a magic of like doing those talks while we are walking or doing something else. Those are, cup fillers.
Mhm. Yeah. Other cup fillers that we also try to do is when we get together, we always eat delicious food, right? Food brings everybody together, right? There's nothing better than sitting around having something delicious that everybody loves, right? Internally and externally, we use laughter. I feel like laughter is huge medicine. We don't laugh enough. And people are like, how do you laugh when you talk about racism? I'm like, oh, there's some funny things that are happening, right? And it just disarms us so that we can learn more. So we use humor a lot with each other, right? We make sure that we laugh in our team meetings. When we're doing some of this work, there's laughter there. We have a therapist on staff that sometimes participates in our workshops. We think about the structure of how we do our work, right? And so if we're having an intensive workshop, there's an arc to the way that we do the work, so that we bring them in light, get in the thick of it, and then try to exit, right? So that there's still some grounding and we're not kind of leaving them just, full of trauma, right, at the end. And acknowledging that. And making sure that if we're working with a larger group, we're working with board members and EDs, right? We have those breakouts where there's a separate space. We create separate spaces for groups of people so that they can process without feeling like they're going to be through the microscope lens, right? And then I think the last thing is making sure that we always come back to why. What's the why in this, right? That helps us stay humanity and humility centered. So that's how we try to create healing space. And we acknowledge when we don't do a great job, because the least we could do, right, is acknowledge if we didn't do a great job. Because our first rule is do no harm, right? So if I mess up, I will call myself out, or my teammate will call me out live and in time, right? And that's how we create healing, is we're honest.
You both talk about teams, and one of the things that I know the Leaderbridge leaders were talking about in their group was also finding that opportunity outside of their team. Are there suggestions on how they find that opportunity for the things you're talking about, but outside of the team? Because sometimes as a leader, you need that support or that strength, and it has to come from somewhere outside of your team and your board.
Yeah, it's being a leader is lonely. And no one ever says it. It's just lonely, 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 right? You can't go to the person you supervise and be like, can you believe what Bob said to me? You can't do that, right? And so, you want to sometimes. And so we're not honest about how lonely it is. And so for me, and then I'll be quiet because I feel I'm taking up too much space, I try to keep some other circles, right? I keep circles of other leaders where we can talk amongst each other to talk about what Bob said to each other, right? In an anonymous way. And then I've got a good group of girlfriends. So making sure to create that space. And then when we're working with teams like this Jedi leadership series we're going to do in conjunction with leadership with Crimsonbridge, making sure there is that space, right, where they can talk to us and we're not going to take it back to their boards, right? So it's intentionally creating these spaces.
Yeah, I 110% support that, intentionally having those spaces. And as a leader, that I see my calendar and I'm like, oh, how can I say yes? Being okay saying yes and making that part of that space that I know that knowing meeting other people, getting to know others that are doing this. It's not only validating, but it's like a whole new resource of, right at the top, just text, a phone call, and email away. And that goes probably against like my nature, but I've been doing it. And again, the Leaderbridge have been like a fantastic opportunity to just say yes and register and go and meet others. So I would say creating those, so we have the opportunity to sign up for, and for those that hesitate, do it. You will learn something. You will meet someone that will be that, that potentially can be that person.
I have more questions for both of you, but I want to make sure that that those of us who are also those who have joined us for this conversation get a chance to ask their questions. So I'm going to stop now and let others ask questions of both of you, because there's just so much that's come out of what you have said, and I just think it's important for the others who are on this session to be able to ask questions too. So Mercy.
Yes, we have a question here from Lori. I'd love to know if you have some resources to suggest, books, articles, TED Talks, or blogs that thoughtfully examine how best practices in NGO management can be reformulated for a more inclusive workforce. You've definitely given us some great ideas and have made me hungry for more.
Two things that I use probably every day is there's an amazing website called Racial Equity Tools. I probably use it every single day. It's probably the best resource. You name it, they've got something in there. There's also this amazing Black woman in California. She runs a company called Diversity, I think LLC.
Mm-hmm.
And she's these great YouTube videos, amazing, like 5-6 minutes about all DEI topics. We use it a lot in our classes for snippets, right? Because people like to listen and watch. So those are two great resources that we lean on.
Another vote for Racial Equity Tools, so good. And again, like you can go in and spend hours and hours just going through links and finding amazing resources. We rely also very closely with our like state coalitions or local coalitions. People just share things, and it's really nice to sometimes find those local resources that are so helpful in understanding that, we want to support each other.
And I'll throw one other one in. Awake to Woke is also another great resource, particularly for boards who are trying to do this work and may not have the opportunity to hire an awesome company like Equity Through Action. Their work is fantastic.
Good stuff.
Awesome.
Yeah.
We have another question here from Karen. How do you balance hiring and advancing BIPOC staff who may not have been taught the skill set that are needed for the role, for example, project management, but can learn them if given the resources, especially when work needs to keep moving, but we want to be committed to bringing in BIPOC staff?
My two answers would be sponsoring and mentoring, and they're different. So a mentoring, right, is where you're meeting with them consistently and working through a set of goals to get them to the next level, right? Sponsoring means I'm inviting them to places. I'm introducing them to Jackie and Diana because they know people, right? And it's out loud and it's action, right? Because people grow when they meet other people they want to be like and be with. So you got to sponsor and mentor folks, and that's how you're going to get people. It's about this access that people of color just don't have, right? Or aren't given. Let me correct myself right now, right? Those are my two answers.
I echo those. I also challenge our teams to think beyond our organization and investing in our team members for like the next generation of advocates. And you can have a great training with us, and maybe like there is another opportunity and we want to support it. So like thinking a little bit more broader than like what's in it, the return of investment for us, and really cultivating that pipeline. There are lots of opportunities that could be a promotion within, but also an opportunity to sit in like some of those meetings, getting some of those tasks that sometimes we don't think that someone is interested, but we haven't asked.
Mm-hmm.
Fantastic. Our next question here is from Marla. This is an excellent discussion, but how do we get board members to the table to hear these discussions?
Good question.
They got the invitation.
They did, and it was free. People love free stuff. So what I did whenever I was running an organization is I would pick 1 or 2 champions on my board, and whatever new thing I wanted to do, run it to them, find out. Actually, I would pick the person who loved me and the person that did not love me and run the same idea to both of them, get their feedback, and then ask them to talk to the board members about it. So I would say if you're trying to get board members to think about investing in diversity, equity, inclusion, justice, whatever language you want to use, find the person that loves you the most, right? And the person that doesn't. Talk about how it can change the policies in the organization, change the innovation of the organization, right? How you may be behind the time, right? The why of it, get their feedback, and then have them help you carry the message to the rest of the board members, right? That's what I've done. And that's when we work with organizations, that's what we do, right?
I think that's a great strategy. I would just add that in trainings that we've had, assessments that we've done, work that we've been doing, there is a board member or 2 that are part of that. So again, it's not us versus them, but it's part of those decisions and that process. And when we're reporting out, as Marie said, you're not the person saying it, you have some allies and people invested in.
I liked what you both said about allies and investing, and C. Marie, I loved what you said about finding that board member who loves you and that board member who doesn't. I think sometimes we don't spend as much time trying to deal with that board member who doesn't love us. And I think that's just, both of you gave great suggestions for that. I'm wondering, my other question would be, what do you wish people understood about leading a nonprofit organization? Oh boy, I see both of your faces going, big question.
How much time do we have?
Well, about 2 minutes.
Okay, here.
No,
Okay,
go ahead.
Diana, do you want to go first?
You can go.
How hard it is, and how many hoops women of color, particularly Black women, have to jump through to get the work done. And then the last thing I would say, right, for philanthropy is the hoops that we as women of color have to jump through. Can you please throw them in the trash? Just stop it. Just trust us. Just give us the money to do the work. Right?
I would add that this is really a labor of love and really hard work, very hard work. It's that microscope that we're under, and it's the telescope that we're expected to have that crystal ball of knowing how things are going to come and have all of those solutions. So I do think that sometimes our philanthropy wants to wait and see. Once there is a new leader, they want to see how they do and then support. And that just doesn't do any good. So again, that trust, that extending grace, and that support, that knowing that typically when we take these roles, it's because, someone has left, might be a little bit more issues, or that's the trend. People of color tend to take these opportunities because maybe, there was a lot more that needed to be done. So give us that support now. Don't wait and see.
I'm glad you both mentioned. Go ahead, C. Marie.
The last thing I'll add is the thing people don't really understand is that a nonprofit is still a business, right? And Diana's running it as a business, right? And so there's this push and pull where they think, oh, well, we're doing this as a labor of love. Diana still has to pay her mortgage, right? Her team still has to pay their rent. So I'll be quiet at that. Just that's the big thing, I think.
No, thank you both, for that, and especially for bringing the philanthropy in to it, because I was going to ask you about philanthropy and what philanthropy can do during this pandemic, which will ultimately lead to an endemic phase where this virus will still be with us, but not in the crunch that it has appeared to be right now. So thank you both for at least adding that philanthropy piece. You know, this has just been a super informational session and super insightful and a great conversation with both of you. And I've got so many different catchphrases and resources and things that I can use myself as a nonprofit leader. And I know that this group can use, especially those of us who are women of color who've been doing this work, and especially under extremely hard conditions during the pandemic. So I want to thank you for answering our questions. I want to thank you for doing as much as you could to bring as much information to our group as possible. We're grateful to have had this time with you today, C. Marie and Diana, and it was a much needed conversation, and it came out of the work that Leaderbridge is doing with leaders of color and the kinds of things they wanted to hear about. I want to make sure that everyone stays in touch with the Women's Foundation, that you visit our website at thewomensfoundation.org. And if you have enjoyed your time with us today, consider donating and supporting Ask Her, because it is a series and it definitely can use your support, but consider donating Ask Her at the Women's Foundation. And I want you to be sure to join us for our next Ask Her, which will be on May 18th, and we'll be announcing more information on that soon. C. Marie and Diana, thank you so much for championing protection, preservation, and justice. Thank you so much for engaging us and talking about your organizations and ways in which women of color, leaders of color, can come together and use your techniques and also come together with each other to deal with the issues we face as nonprofit leaders during this time. And I want to thank everyone who joined us today for being with us, for joining this Ask Her, and for continuing to support the Women's Foundation. So again, thank you and good afternoon.
Thank
Thanks
you.
so much.
Virtual hug to everyone. Thanks so much.